Don't worry. I'm in complete control. Speaking of which, I'm not really feeling these waves. Let's get those swapped out, huh? Ah, that's better. Ooh, and maybe we'll add a little thunderstorm to help set the mood. Yes, perfect. And there you have it. A nice, mellow, beautiful space for you and I to sit back and just observe the world of high strangeness. Sitting just close enough to that edge to give us a bit of a thrill, but not so close to the edge as to risk falling over and losing control. And besides, today's account of high strangeness takes place in my hometown, and I know these waters well, so there's no need to worry. We can be at ease. I'm in complete control. I think. Hello and welcome, my freshwater friends, to episode 14 of the About the Water podcast, an exploration of high strangeness on and around the Great Lakes. Today, I can tell you that we're headed to the southern waters of Lake Michigan, Chesterton, Indiana. But beyond that, what lies in store for each of us, I can't really say, as I'm not sure this story has come to a conclusion yet, as the winds are still howling about the water. Episode 14, Sand, Sage, and Obsidian. Only one set of headlights cut through the darkness on the empty, wooded road. A northeasterly wind pummeled the car as it neared the dark and deserted southern shore of Lake Michigan. The success of their mission would come down to one thing: luck, and luck alone. It was well past 10:30 p.m. on the hot summer evening of June 11th, 2013. Jade had seen on social media that the northern lights may be visible as far south as the Indiana Dunes State Park. With the rest of her household asleep, she texted the one person she knew for sure would join her on an adventure, her 23-year-old son, Scott. The main beach at the Indiana Dunes State Park is haunting and an intimidating sight at night. Thick woods climb the sand dunes on either side, giving you the feeling that darkness is closing in around you. The huge and shadowy beach pavilion appears out of the void, a motionless architectural relic from the end of the Roaring Twenties, set in an eerie contrast against the glowing and bustling Chicago skyline 30 miles beyond. Jade parked the car, and as soon as she and her son stepped out, the attack began. Sand from the beach would hit like waves, blasting and stinging every inch of exposed skin, something the residents of the southern shore had become accustomed to on windy days. But that wasn't about to stop Jade or Scott from seeing the northern lights. As it turns out, however, the sky conditions would. The two walked across the wide beach and down to the water's edge. The weather had taken a turn for the worse. The northeasterly winds had whipped the waves up into a frenzy. Looking to the sky, all they saw was a thick layer of clouds. If there were indeed auroras, they would be invisible behind them. The two walked silently. The roaring winds were so loud it would drown out their voices when they did try to speak. A short way down the beach, Scott saw that someone else must have had the same idea as them. A man stood, staring motionlessly across Lake Michigan, undoubtedly wanting to will the clouds away. He didn't seem to notice them. After a brief time, Jade and Scott walked back to the parking lot, and as they neared the shelter of the car, they could finally hear one another again. "Guess we're not going to see anything," sighed Jade. Scott agreed, following up with, "I wonder if that guy saw anything." Jade stopped and looked around. "What guy?" she asked. Scott turned towards the beach to motion to the man, but there was no one there. Jade scanned the horizon as well. There was absolutely no one around, nor were there any other vehicles in the parking lot. The two got into the car and started the engine, and Jade's focus was now entirely on the man, while her pragmatic son wasn't giving it a second thought. "So what about that guy?" she asked. "I don't know. I don't see him now," Scott replied. No stranger to the paranormal herself, Jade's intuition demanded that she inquire. "So what did he look like?" Scott explained that the man was dressed in a heavy coat, like a pea coat maybe, and that he had a hat on. Making note of the hot summer temperature, Jade was curious as to why the man would be wearing a winter coat. She was also curious about the hat, asking Scott, like a cowboy hat or a trucker hat or a baseball hat? Scott thought for a moment and explained that it wasn't as much of a hat as a cap, kind of like a newspaper boy cap, he offered. "Did he say anything to you?" Jade asked cautiously. Scott explained that the man didn't say anything. No eye contact was made, no gestures were made. He was just standing there. It wasn't a big deal. Scrolling through some photos on her phone, Jade found one of a sailor wearing a century-old wool cap. "Yeah, that's it," Scott said. And with that, the two began their return trip home. Jade had always described Scott as being born with an antenna, able to see things that others can't, and able to predict things that he could not have seen coming. Scott finds it a bit of a distraction, and he actively decides to try and turn that part of himself off. Jade, however, embraces that side of herself, and a short time later she began to put the puzzle pieces together, finally understanding what Scott's antenna was tuning into that evening. She landed on a single name, J.D. Marshall. J.D. Marshall is a she, as all true ships are, or rather, in this case, were. The J.D. Marshall was a steam-powered carrier ship created to haul lumber and pig iron and even sand around Chicago and northwest Indiana. Late one evening, on her way back to Chicago, she sprung a leak. Her captain, Captain Rand, decided to throw anchor while a few of the crew went below deck to try and patch her up. The evening would have been just like the one that Jade and Scott had experienced. A squall came in, cloudying up the skies, churning waves and blowing sand. As her cargo began to shift, so did the J.D. Marshall. 20-foot waves crashed over her deck, eventually causing her to turn turtle, and intact, she sank to the bottom of Lake Michigan. Her heroic captain, surviving the ordeal, swam a half-mile to shore. Here he found a rowboat and fearlessly piloted it back into the darkness and the waves to save the rest of his crew. In the end, 4 souls were tragically lost, and despite his incredible efforts, Captain Rand was left standing on the shores with only half of his crew, left with little option other than to gaze out at the water offshore. That empty patch of water where his beloved ship was, not moments ago. Precisely where Scott had seen the sailor looking, under the exact same weather conditions, on June 11th, 1911, 102 years prior to the day. As Jade finished up telling me she and Scott's story, I was miles away in my mind. Yes, I'll end it right there on that date reveal, that da-na-na moment. I'll fade the wind out, fade the waves out. Ooh, in the closing thoughts, I'll throw in an eerie and awesome fact. I'll tie in Scott's ability to, as Jade said, predict things that he could not see coming, with the strange fact that only 3 months after his experience, the J.D. Marshall, in a surprise move, would become Indiana's first shipwreck preserve. And voila! Another episode would be done and ready to launch in no time. I am in complete control. In that moment, I sat in the back of Jade's shop. I felt so thankful for the chance to meet all of my amazing and fascinating freshwater neighbors like Jade. And I was so excited for you and I to continue on our journey through the world of high strangeness together. Comfortably, you know? as observers. You and I both merely an audience to these strange encounters. Well, as it would turn out, the weather in the world of high strangeness can turn as quickly as that of the Great Lakes, and I was about to have my own world turn turtle as I went from observer to participant. I fell in love at first glance with Jade's impeccably curated shop. Pieces of Jade is billed as a metaphysical supply store, but in reality, it's an artistic celebration of all things that someone who loves high strangeness could ever ask for. It's a warm and inviting space that unquestionably promotes the beautiful side of all things mystical. And there's no spooky or strange vibes. It just felt cozy, safe, and Jade could not have been more inviting or generous with her time and in sharing her stories. Naturally, I wanted to be a good patron and support the shop to the best of my means. For some time I had been searching for a necklace, for no other reason than I thought it would look cool and be a neat keepsake I could continue to wear as I went on my journeys around the Great Lakes. As Jade escorted me from the back room where she makes the jewelry out to the front of the store, I decided that, yeah, indeed, a necklace was the way to go. I was taken off guard by a sudden and strange wave of anxiety. I took myself even by surprise when I just blurted out, "I need something to protect myself." What? Why on earth did I just say that? I noticed that even Jade seemed a bit perplexed by my remark. It was indeed a departure from the exciting and lively and fun conversation we were having just a moment ago. I didn't know why, but I was getting really nervous. Like a circuit breaker, all of my insecurities and fears seemed to be switching on one by one. For the first time since I started collecting these stories years ago, I was, in a single word, spooked. Whatever this strange feeling was, it had my attention. Jade walked me towards the front of the store and suggested a necklace made out of a black rope with a sort of closable mesh bag on the bottom. She then directed my attention towards an impressive rack of crystals and precious stones. "You can change out the crystal at any time," she advised, which was perfect. I could make a thing out of collecting more stones along my travels and just changing them out as I go. Sold. I was ashamed to admit to Jade, as the host of a high strangeness podcast, that I know next to nothing about crystals. I was relieved when she walked over and pointed out to one of the containers, suggesting I choose obsidian. Jade explained that obsidian was a glass, volcanically forged in Mexico, and was known in the spiritual community for its strong ability to protect the wearer. Obsidian it was. But as I reached in to grab a piece, I felt a strong, I guess you could say, force start to close in around me. Looking into the bin, I saw 3 pieces of obsidian, all pitch black, and the bin itself seemed to be, as strange as it sounds, absorbing light. It appeared at first glance to be bottomless. Some kind of strange and intuitive voice said from inside me, "None of these pieces are meant for you." My gut was telling me to turn around and step away, but I didn't want to appear rude. So I decided on my plan right then and there. Reach in, grab it, buy it, say thank you, and we'll figure out what to do with all this later. Reach in and grab it went according to plan. However, the series of events that would follow didn't. Not knowing what else to do in that moment, I looked at the display for some other interesting stones, but a mental fog seemed to envelop me. I had tunnel vision. I couldn't read the names of the stones, and I was fighting myself just to keep my head pointed in that direction. I found myself rubbing the obsidian, compulsively, like someone would rub a genie lamp, as if I was trying to make something happen. A couple of customers were checking out with Jade's shop assistant, Cheyenne. I could hear them talking, but in muffled and muted tones. I looked around the space and could even hear myself speaking to Jade in the third person, but I haven't the slightest idea what I said. Based on her expression, I'm pretty sure that Jade knew something was going on. "I feel really uncomfortable," I said, holding up the rock. "I want to put it back, but I feel like my hand won't let me. I just keep holding it, I keep rubbing it," I said quietly. The customers left, and without saying a word, Jade removed the stone from my hand. She walked over to Cheyenne, who was not yet privy to the situation, and just handed it to her. Immediately, Cheyenne's warm and smiling expression changed to one of concern. "Yeah," she said, "I'm definitely getting some strange energy." She mentioned that it felt negative or anxious. The stone felt like it was still in my hand. I could actually feel it. It was small, square, almost a perfect cube, with a very small indent on one side, perfect for the size of my thumb. Without knowing why, I just picked up my cell phone and snapped a photo of the stone as it sat on the shop's counter. It wasn't square at all. It was oblong and oval-shaped, and it didn't have any indents. And it wasn't pitch black like I remembered it from just seconds ago. It was iridescent, beautiful. It glowed a brilliant blue in my photo. I suddenly smelled a pleasant fragrance in the air. Sage. Jade was waving a bundle of smoking sage next to me, telling me to rotate counterclockwise and instructing anything that may have attached itself to me to let go and to not follow me. Although the shop was now empty, I could sense that there were 4 people there. Jade, Cheyenne, myself, and that stone. It was looking at me, and it was pissed. Jade walked behind the counter and held the obsidian in her hand, holding the bundle of smoking sage in the other. Cheyenne and myself gathered around, and we watched in astonishment as the smoke from the sage rose, but refused to touch the stone. Jade waved her hand back and forth, turning the obsidian from side to side, and asked if, in fact, Cheyenne and myself were noticing the same thing she was. We both instantly and unquestioningly agreed yes. The next few moments became a blur. Jade handed me a large black rock, which I was afraid to hold at first. The obsidian was still looking at me, angry at me, and trying to speak to me in an aggressive, angry, masculine way, a voice that could almost pass for my own when I'm not at my best. I said a word to no one, aside from telling Jade that holding that piece of tourmaline she handed me indeed had a strange, calming effect. After some silence, words just began to well up inside of me, and without planning what I said, I just spoke. "That rock needs to go someplace, to be taken someplace. It wants to go somewhere," I said. Jade, picking up the stone again, said that she may in fact take it to Lake Michigan that evening. Me being, as one might say, about the water, I of course thought that would be a fitting finale, and I thanked her. Before I left, Jade handed me a piece of garnet. I didn't ask questions, I just took it and said thank you and headed home, telling myself that the ordeal was over. I was back in control. I wasn't. I gripped my tourmaline in one hand and the garnet in the other. I found myself longing for the safety of the shop. I could feel the obsidian shouting to me from a distance. It wanted me to come back. It wanted to go south. Lake Michigan is north. And if it were to end up in Lake Michigan, I would lose my chance at ever understanding what it truly wanted. Not caring if I did sound crazy at this point, I called Jade. I let her know the strange feelings I was having, and with kindness and understanding, she thanked me for telling her and said that she would not take the stone to Lake Michigan. A short time passed, and it took its sweet time in doing so. My phone buzzed. One new message from Jade. It read, "My medium friend is here, and she thinks something attached itself to you." I don't think my feet touched the ground as I hopped in the car and drove back to the shop. I spent the entire drive just thinking about Jade's text. Something attached itself to you. As terrifying of a concept as it was, it just didn't feel right. If anything, I felt the exact opposite. I felt like I had left something behind at the shop, like leaving the house without a cell phone or a wallet. The feeling of not having it was just unsettling. When I stepped into the shop, Jade's medium friend Nicole was sitting in a corner near the register. She looked exhausted, like she just stepped out of a metaphysical boxing ring. I didn't need to introduce myself. She knew exactly who I was when I walked through the door. "Well, that was a rough cleansing," she said to me. Jade grinned and shook her head and motioned over towards Nicole. "She honed right in on that rock," Jade said. "She calmed it down." Nicole explained that the rock definitely had a masculine presence, and that it seemed to be an angry or anxious man, maybe in his late 30s or 40s. My head was pounding. Cheyenne stood behind the counter, also complaining of a sore neck, while Jade said that she had a headache now on the left side of her head. After explaining that those feelings can be normal during a cleansing, and that sometimes the process feels like a pressure release, Nicole asked me a question that rocked me to my core. "When was the last time you were around anything paranormal?" I thought about the question for a moment. My initial internal reaction was, all the time. Look at the show I do. But that's when it hit me. Despite talking to all of the people I do on a near daily basis for this podcast, despite the travels around the Great Lakes and the often eerie environments, I couldn't tell you the last time I actually experienced anything paranormal. I had become so obsessed with collecting it, analyzing it, editing it, publishing it, and controlling it, that I had completely forgotten to be present and experience any of it. My innocent and open-hearted fascination with a world that I didn't understand had turned into a sleepless mission to mine it, and in a moment of revelation that almost left me in tears, I realized that I had spent so much time chasing likes and hearts and trying to promote this show that I hadn't been to my beloved lake in weeks. The Obsidian had done its job. It drew a negative energy out of me. It offered me protection against a dangerous foe that was obscuring my path. That anxious and angry, early 40-year-old man. Me. My headache was gone. My anxiety was gone. The need to be accepted and succeed with this show and my sudden fear of the unknown, they were all gone. "I think something transferred from you to that rock, which can happen," Jade said, unprompted. Cheyenne nodded her head in agreement. It had played out like a story, with a pleasant ending. But I had learned my lesson, and knew better than to assume it was over. Looking over at Nicole, she gave me a confident smile, and it was showtime. Without knowing me for more than 60 seconds, and without me offering a shred of personal insight, Nicole identified the following. I was a rare INFJ personality type, like 3 of the 4 people in that room, and that my empath tendencies can make my life difficult. They also are what draw me to the paranormal. I was astonished. How could she have known that? She also knew that I was an Aquarius, like 3 of the 4 people in that room, and that my struggle is, and always has been, difficulty with grounding myself. Absolutely true. She explained that Aquariuses think celestially, big picture, which also shines a spotlight on how incapable we can be of being present in that moment. "Maybe some garnet?" Nicole suggested, looking over at Jade. Jade and I both smiled. "Already got some," I replied, rubbing the stone that Jade had given me in my pocket. Nicole also knew without asking that I struggled with OCD, anxiety, sometimes depression, explaining that they can sometimes amplify otherworldly signals. "Sometimes picking up on something works through your imagination," Nicole offered. She then mentioned that I may be more sensitive than I realized, picking up on the energies of people of the past, and that these energies might be drawn to me because they find me comforting and calming. With that last statement, I was transported back to the very beginning of my high strangeness journey. I began this entire podcast series with a single sentence. Ghosts are real. It's in reference to the invisible hands of all those that came before us that continue to shape our lives long after their passing. But how could Nicole have known that? I asked her if she indeed had listened to the show, and she said no. First time I was ever kind of grateful to get that answer. In that moment, I felt an energy shift. It was calm, peaceful. It was a happy energy. Cheyenne smiled. Nicole smiled. Jade smiled. I think they picked up on it too. "Well, I'm out," Jade said with a laugh, clapping her hands and preparing to head out for the afternoon. I looked around the shop. Pieces of Jade. This incredible shop in my incredible town with these incredible new friends. I had walked into that shop that morning, carrying with me the worst parts of myself, my insecurities and my expectations and my desire for control. And now they were gone, cleansed, lost to the Obsidian. "Well, that was bizarre," I said, and Jade spoke. "This is our lives." This is normally the part where I offer you some of my thoughts on someone else's experience. However, seeing as how the second half was my own experience, I think it's important to leave that part up to you. As Nicole said, sometimes picking up on something can work through your imagination, and maybe you're more sensitive than you realize. Regardless of what actually transpired with respect to the Obsidian, I can tell you the outcome. It brought 4 good and wonderful people into my life. Jade, Cheyenne, Nicole, and you. And even if you're just peeking through the shop window, my intuition is telling me to make this bet. I bet you'd fit right in with this amazing group, because I bet you're the kind of person that is willing to listen and understand instead of just dismiss and judge. I bet you have a unique ability to connect with people, to see and value people for who they truly are, and not the versions of themselves that they edit and package and present as a show. And I'd be willing to bet that, like Captain Rand, you wouldn't think twice about jumping in the rowboat and heading out into furious waters in order to help somebody. And with all that being said, just thank you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting this whole thing. I don't know where this journey's going to go, but I'm really glad we're doing this together. And look, I know me saying all this is going to sound sappy, and quite frankly, after the experience I had, I just don't care. I don't know. I just feel like you need to hear it. Maybe it's a reminder to us both, in all things in which we believe ourselves to just be mere observers, we couldn't be more wrong. All of our unique paths intertwine, and in each other's lives and in each other's journeys, we are, and always have been, participants. And I'll tell you, the only part I couldn't reconcile with all of this was the feeling that the Obsidian wanted to go south. And it wasn't until I was checking in on pieces of Jade on social media that I found myself grinning and nodding, and I think finally understanding. Pieces of Jade will be moving from Chesterton, Indiana to Valparaiso, Indiana. Or, if you look on a map, straight south. Whether it's the meteorology of the Great Lakes or the metaphysiology of the Great Lakes, I think what keeps our antennas focused on this incredible place is its constant reminders that we, you and I, are not in control. And with that, thank you again, sincerely, for listening. And until our paths intertwine again, may your journey be as grand, beautiful, and enduring as our Great Lakes. I'll see you about the water.